Come on in, guys. Welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're examining Survivor's biggest screen hogs. A few weeks ago, I examined Survivor's most invisible players, so I think it's only fair that we finally give Survivor's most visible players their due. I mean, finally, about time someone talked about Boston Rob and Russell, you know? There are a couple ways this could be calculated, all leading to basically the same conclusion. I'll be using the player's percentage of the total confessionals to calculate who's hogging up all the screen time and who isn't, as I think that's probably our best metric here. While confessional average would also be a fine way to sort this all out, there are a few early boots who received a ton of confessionals in like episode 2 or 3, then were voted out, seriously skewing their average. Vince from Island of the Idols, for example, has a confessional average greater than Rick Devens, thanks to a whopping 10 confessionals in episode 3 when he gets voted out. And look, while I'm dying to talk about Vince at some point, if someone clicks a link about Survivor Screen Hogs and I start talking about an obscure episode 3 boot, that won't go great for me. As we count down these 10 screen hogs, we'll be examining their games and hopefully unpacking why they got so much screen time. While most of the usual suspects you're undoubtedly thinking of are gonna show up, there will be some seriously surprising inclusions and snubs. Now, full disclosure, after I made this video, I realized I'd forgotten someone, the person at number 7. And because of a tie for 10th place, I was already covering 11 people, so instead of just scrapping those 2 segments I'd already finished, I'll be including them regardless. All that to say, because I can't count, we'll actually be covering the 12 biggest screen hogs in Survivor history, which I guess sorta makes sense. A couple supersized videos for some supersized edits. See, it's thematic. All that said, let's dig into the 10 or 12 biggest screen hogs in Survivor history, starting with numbers 12 through 7. At number 12, we have Kathy in Survivor Marquesas with 16.9% of the total confessionals. And yes, unfortunately, Kathy is our only woman in this entire top 10. It's easy to forget that Kathy was one of the biggest stars of the show's early years. Literally Rupert tier popularity, and she's got the edit to prove it. Kathy was at the center of some of Marquesas' biggest moments, from finding a skull, to the downfall of the Row 24, to finally getting stabbed not even in the back, but stabbed in the front by Vesepia at the Final 3 Immunity Challenge. Kathy's transformation from obnoxiously overeager, likely first boot on Row 2 to legitimate strategic and social powerhouse and endgame swing vote is one of my favorite growth edits in Survivor history, and probably the first ever on the show. If you're not familiar with this is basically someone who is portrayed as a total fish out of water early in the game. Someone who's a clear early boot, but who ends up, through the transformative power of Survivor, blossoming into a late game threat. Maybe they learn something about themselves along the way, growing as a person. While we see someone portrayed this way quite often now, in 2001 it wasn't something that had really been seen on reality TV before. And speaking of things that hadn't been seen on TV before, if you need further proof of just why Kathy was given so much content in Marquesas, look no further than episode 3, when John gets stung by a sea urchin. John, a nurse, explains to the camera that urine will neutralize the venom, so he needs someone to come pee on him ASAP. But he offers little in the way of explanation to his tribe.
I need somebody who has to pee. I need somebody who can pee on my hand.
Nonetheless, Kathy, with no context as to why this perfect stranger needs a golden shower, comes a run-in to fulfill John's request and unfulfill her bladder all over his hand. Although, I guess, don't be too impressed, guys. This actually is just how they bathe in Vermont. At number 11 is Chris in Survivor Vanuatu, also with 16.9% of Vanuatu's confessionals. Chris is the biggest surprise to me in this entire top 10, but I'm always glad to see Chris, so no complaints here. Chris is easily one of Survivor's greatest one-time players, a BSer for the ages, a total schemer and liar who could get anyone eating out of the palm of his hand, even as he stabbed them in the back with the other.
You question a woman's character?
You question a woman's ability, she'll snap your neck. You open up your heart, show a woman you're vulnerable, then they start thinking with their heart. That's when they open up that back door.
Said scheming and lying helped him to overcome not only a nearly guaranteed first boot after he completely tanked the Episode 1 immunity challenge, but also a nearly insurmountable 6-to-4 ratio of men to women at the merge, which quickly became a 6-to-1 ratio as Rory, Sarge, and Chad were voted out one by one. Chris stages one of the best comebacks in Survivor history by exploiting cracks in the Women's Alliance, using Amy and Leanne's decision to go after Eliza instead of Chris at Final 7 as a way to flip the game against them, then positioning himself as a swing vote between Eliza and Julie and Scout and Twyla. Chris understood how to smooth talk each of these people to get exactly what he wants, culminating in one of the greatest and most BS-filled Final Tribal performances ever, where he humbly apologizes to both Eliza and Julie for wronging them, tells Chad how he just became too myopic in his hunt for the money, and he'll need to reflect on that to change later. And told Sarge that he doesn't care if Sarge votes for him. Their friendship means more to him regardless of where his vote goes, as if Sarge was ever going to not vote for Chris. Only Scout recognizes that it's all a bunch of, well, I'll let her explain it.
Chris, you are both up to your ears. I'm not sure where that takes you, except it sits you right where you are. Thanks for the 38-day ride.
Chris's edit does get a bit too overbearing down the stretch, with 17 confessionals each in both episodes 13 and 14, which is what obviously brings him up to this top 10. But it makes sense. Chris's betrayal of Julie in episode 13 is about as Shakespearean as Survivor gets, and they were gonna milk that puppy for all it's worth. I mean, Julie also got a ton of confessionals this episode. And you know what? I've always said that Shakespeare should have more road construction dudes from Ohio with ponytails as protagonists. At number 10 is Lex, with 17% of the confessionals in Survivor Africa. What makes Lex such a great character in Africa for me is that he's such a complex human being. He's cast totally against type, a nurturing, well-educated family man with a tatted up and heavily pierced exterior. Let's be real, dudes who look like Lex were not on television in 2001. And if they were portrayed as some sort of stereotypical, unsavory character. But despite his genuinely good heart, his flaws are also on full display throughout the season too. He can be giving out medical supplies at a hospital one minute, and going utterly ballistic over a stray vote the next.
The person that threw that vote at me and that now chooses to hide torques me, and it pisses me off that I can't figure it out and smoke him out right away.
Lex is a constant presence throughout the pre-merge of Africa, but never overwhelming or anything. We see his alliances with Big Tom and Ethan form, his ever-increasing control over Boran, and his constant need to trust his gut.
My gut tells me, without doubt, that I can trust him. Right. And you know my gut is good.
A gut which would actually later betray him at the final immunity challenge with some very poorly timed dysentery. His big spike in airtime is at Final 9 when he goes on a rampage trying to find who sent a stray vote his way at the clearance boot, getting a whopping 14 confessionals as he interrogates everyone on the tribe, completely switching up his game plan on a false and paranoid hunch that Kelly voted for him, driving her into the willing arms of the Samburus and nearly ending his game right then and there. After this, well, hope you like Lex. He gets confessionals in double digits nearly every episode from here on out. And that's pretty fair to me. He completely dominates socially, strategically, and physically. One immunity challenge away from an easy win over Kim Johnson at Final Tribal. So your enjoyment of the latter half of Africa will largely be dependent on how much tolerance you have for his sometimes paranoid hypocrisy. Me, I find the juxtaposition between that and his gentle family man persona pretty refreshing. In an age of heroes and villains, he's definitely a villain, but, you know, a nice villain. I mean, he did peel a tick off of Lindsay's butt. Gentlemanly. At number 9 is Russell in Survivor Heroes vs. Villains, with 17.2% of the total confessionals. I've got to hand it to Russell. Eating up all the screen time in Samoa was impressive against newbies, but eating up all the screen time in an all-star season, well, that's just awe-inspiring. Here's the thing about Russell. He plays a top-tier strategic game from day 1 to about day 38.99. If Survivor were a game of chess, Russell would be one of the greats, but his social game leaves a lot to be desired. You know, that thing that gets you votes at the end.
You're such a dumbass, Rupert.
In fact, during Heroes vs. Villains, Russell was absent from camp almost all the time, away from crucial tribe bonding moments, skulking about in the woods, doing, God knows what. Russell's game on paper this season is pretty great. He wins the pre-merge war against Boston Rob and Tyson with an insanely good idol play, manages to get Jerry and Coach on his side, leads the heroes on into giving him an idol, and helps get his alliance to the end game. But he's completely lacking the human element of getting people to like you. Russell both strongly benefited and was hindered by his downtime between seasons. He only had 2 weeks off back in the real world between Samoa and Heroes vs. Villains, meaning that his fellow Heroes vs. Villains castaways hadn't seen him play in Samoa. This benefited Russell greatly. If his fellow villains had seen him play and he was acting the same way he did, he is likely the first villain out. And the heroes certainly wouldn't have given him an immunity idol. Well, actually scratch that, never underestimate the heroes' tribe capacity to do dumb stuff. However, the mental toll of playing back-to-back in such a short amount of time clearly is affecting Russell by the second half of Heroes vs. Villains. He gets increasingly paranoid to the point of self-destruction. I don't think a clear-minded Russell with a longer layover between seasons eliminates Danielle, for example, one of the only people he could have beaten at the end. Speaking of in the end, Russell makes a lot of assumptions about how juries will vote that is just plain wrong. He tends to assume that someone who tried so hard and got so far would automatically win the jury votes. But in the end, all those idol plays and power moves didn't even matter. The jury would happily vote for anyone who wasn't Russell. As for the oversized edit, it's almost impossible to explain just how large Russell loomed over the Survivor franchise and reality TV as a whole at this point unless you lived through it. But WrestleMania was genuinely huge, and Samoa was a massively popular season. And let me tell you, it wasn't because of Brett.
He's no Mike Tyson. He's Brett.
America loved Hance. So we got Russell Hance, Brandon Hance, Willie Hance, Sean Hance, Holding Hance. Well, I guess you can't blame CBS for following the money. At number 8 is Dominic in Survivor Ghost Island, also with 17.2% of the total confessionals. At the time, the editing of Ghost Island was completely baffling. So much of the narrative was focused around Dom and Wendell to the point it was actually frustrating. Like, who are these other people? Only in hindsight did it come to make sense, with the revelation in the finale that the two guys who ran strategic circles around everyone else actually tied in a historic finale. As for Dom's big edit, particularly over Wendell, who got a respectable 10% of the Ghost Island confessionals, well, it's no secret that Survivor loves their big, bombastic players, and Dom is one of the biggest and bombastiest. Whereas Wendell played a quieter game built on making real bonds and deep connections, Dom played a big moves game that would make Sierra herself proud, using legacy advantages, idols, and fake idols to bluff his way to final tribal council, sometimes in ways that rubbed the jury the wrong way. Okay, often in ways that rubbed the jury the wrong way. And that's not to mention Dom's feud with Chris Noble, which takes up a great deal of screen time pre-merge, which it's pretty hilarious that we thought this guy was going to be a legit threat.
People think that models might be self-absorbed, they might be dumb, just a lot of things that might not be beneficiary to me.
Much has been made of Dom getting the jury votes from the first 5 people on the jury, and Wendell getting the jury votes from the last 5 people on the jury, and I think the theory that early jurors were wowed by Dom's showmanship at Tribal Council, and later jurors voted for Wendell out of the genuine social bonds they made, holds water. But like Aubrey and Michelle before them, the winner was the one who spent more time investing in personal relationships. Of course, there is still overlap in these two styles of play. Wendell played a fantastic strategic game too, and I don't want to make it sound like Dom was disliked or anything like that. He is, of course, one of the best runners-up the show's ever seen, one of the best to never win, and against almost anyone else on any other season, Dom is a Survivor winner. But you upset the wrong sea bass, you pay the price.
Yeah, we were brothers, and yeah, I was gonna vote you out, but that was brutal. I'm a lover, dude. Like, I played from my heart. That was my entire game. I didn't even have strategy, you know?
Seabass said that? At number 7 is Colby in Survivor Australia, with 17.4% of that season's confessionals. Colby is a bona fide Survivor legend, and Survivor's first real quote-unquote hero. America truly fell in love with Colby back in 2001, owing to his all-American good looks, challenge dominance, and charismatic, generally agreeable personality. A major and very memorable plotline of Australia is Jerry's increasingly one-sided flirtation with Colby. Sure, when it starts, he's at least somewhat receptive to the attention, but his tolerance for her quickly evaporates as she continually talks about and flirts with him, even as he's very clearly disinterested.
I think Colby's afraid of me, because this fantasy I have about chocolate and sex definitely involves him.
God, I can't take it. I can't take it anymore!
I may be a lot of things, but I ain't no Hershey bar.
Post-merge, Colby won 5 immunity challenges in a row and 3 reward challenges, making him easily one of the most dominant physical players in Survivor history, as well as gaining him a whole bunch of screen time, given old-school Survivor's larger focus overall on showing rewards and celebrating immunity wins. Although, you can't win them all, Colby. Man, if you'd been that good at throwing water out of buckets in Heroes vs. Villains, you would have won that Loved Ones challenge.
Come on, Reed, get it!
All those immunity wins help Colby cruise control straight to the final 3, where he's given the option of taking Tina or Keith to the end. Colby takes Tina, knowing she's a strong final tribal competitor, and that he's giving up a guaranteed win over Keith. Now, to our modern Survivor eyes, this may look like a very dumb move, but in my opinion, this isn't exactly a woo-level situation. He wasn't mind-gamed or anything like that. Colby knew he was taking the tougher person to beat, a calculated risk knowing that tens of millions of people would be watching, and that he'd built his entire brand on integrity. This was a time when Survivor players could take their appearance on the show and actually, if they played their cards right, turn it into a career in Hollywood. Colby lost by a single vote, but did manage to parlay all that into a hosting gig on Top Shot and several IMDb credits on popular shows. So who's the real winner here? Well, still Tina. Got nothing else for ya. Next week we'll be taking a look at the 6 biggest edits in Survivor history, so I hope you'll join me. Until next time, don't get idled out.